So the question on the top of the page, are you an expert in science? Anybody an expert in science in here? No? Yeah, me neither. You wish? You wish you were an expert in science? All science, like all of it? Yeah. So is anybody in here a biologist? Anybody in here ever studied DNA? Have you ever conducted experiments in a laboratory or made new discoveries in science? Anybody in here ever do that? No? Anybody in here have a PhD in physics, biology, chemistry, anthropology, or mathematics? So nobody in here is an expert. So if you're not an expert, then why question the experts? So nobody in here is qualified to answer any of these questions. Those people who are qualified to answer these questions, why question them? So the individual down below here, his name is Franz, I don't know, something Austrian, right? He's a biologist. He says the principle of evolution is universally valid in that it can be extended to the spheres of psychology, sociology, and culture. Evolutionary ideas can also be applied to the analysis of those phenomena which are usually regarded as belonging to theories of science. As a result, this view then becomes relatively more important in the evaluation of progress of scientific research. There's an expert biologist in the field, PhD, Austrian-born, German-speaking, expert. Next guy, Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck, he was a French biologist who died in 1829, said this: life is nothing but physical phenomenon. All life features originate in mechanical, physical, and chemical processes which are based on the properties of organic matter of life. What is he saying there?
That there's no soul, that there's no spiritual.
You are correct, Kelvin. Everything is matter. There is no immaterial. Notice he died in 1829. Why is that significant? Why is him dying in 1929 significant when it comes to this? Because Darwin published his Origin of Species in what year?
1829.
Yep, 1859. Darwin published his Origin of Species. Everybody thinks evolutionary theory started with Darwin. He just popularized it. It was around long before Darwin. So we have two experts. One saying evolution is valid and should be applied to every field of knowledge. The other one saying everything is matter, that there is no immaterial. Next page. Francis Crick and James Watson. I mentioned these people many times in the past. 1953, the first scientists to formulate an accurate description of the molecule's complex double helix structure. So they discovered this in 1953 in DNA. Evolutionary biology was revolutionized by the discovery of DNA. So when they discovered DNA, they attributed it to evolution. Mutations. Researchers realized change the spelling of the cookbook. So in other words, they understood the code of DNA and how everything evolves from that. A single base pair may change, or a set of genes may be duplicated. Those mutations that confer a selective advantage to an individual become more common over time, and ultimately these mutant genes may drive the older versions out of existence. So by the study of DNA, new genes replace old genes. That's how we evolved. Richard Dawkins, in those pictures here. Anybody ever write a New York Times top seller book? Anybody in here ever write a book on science or biology? Well, Richard Dawkins has. He's an accomplished author. He's an accomplished speaker. He's a well-known person. Biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. And then Cyril, however you pronounce his last name, life is only a special and complicated property of matter, and basically there is no difference between a living organism and lifeless matter. So these are the experts. These people have PhDs, these people have written books. Nobody in here qualifies for this, therefore why should we question them?
Because the Bible says it's different.
Yes, that's true.
And we believe the word is truth.
But here's the question then, Calvin. Christians use an ancient book for their answers, but experts use science. So why stay in the Stone Age?
There are scientists that are believers in the Word of God and have proved over and over that it's very valid. It's a basis you can develop your science out of.
It's less than 3% of all scientists, though.
It doesn't
So that means
matter who
97%.
they're finding.
97% would disagree. So the overwhelming majority is on the side of these people.
Right, that might be so, but truth rarely is accepted as the basis of their thought. This is the basis of our thought. It's truly valid. It's completely scientific. Just because it's 3% doesn't say whether it's true or not true.
So how would you answer these objections that they have made on here?
They can have their viewpoint, and they can be.
Right, but how would we answer these objections using everything that we've been studying the last 3 months?
Well, we'd have to take it apart. We'd have to take the book apart. If you want to talk about,
Yeah, but this is for the whole class, not just...
right, but if you want to talk about experts,
How would we answer these? I don't want to give any indication and then tip you off, because then you're going to be, oh yeah, no, this is what happens when you step outside of church and enter into the secular world and the secular community. This is what you're going to get everywhere you face. What are you going to do? When your kids went to college, this is what they got. When your grandkids go to college, this is what they get. Have we provided them and supplied them with the answers and the ammunition and the ability to reason through these?
I have in a more basic way, but go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, in the beginning, God created goes light years towards explaining the existence of anything. And they can't account for where all their matter originated. So,
Okay.
they say, well, it's a fairy tale, you want to believe in that, go ahead.
I would say just two things maybe that would start us out is you can only interpret, or you can only study scientific things in a scientific way, and then also every experiment needs an interpretation. So I'd maybe start with that, because they can only explain scientific things using their science, but every scientific thing needs an interpretation, and every interpretation must come from a soul. But I don't know how to, yeah.
It comes from a belief. Sorry.
No, you're good. Go ahead, Calvin.
Yeah, she's right. It comes from a belief, because if you believe in evolution, then you're going to interpret the facts of science according to your evolutionary belief. But if you believe in the Word of God, then you're going to interpret the facts based on what God says about reality, you know. And so the facts are the facts. It all comes down to do you believe what God says is true, and do you interpret the facts accordingly?
So here are the facts, and from the facts flow interpretation. And then so from interpretation we get evolution, or from over here we get creation. But what about above facts? What do we have here?
Our beliefs.
Right, we have our presuppositions.
Right.
And here we have God. And here we have no God. Now what?
Should those be reversed?
Either way, doesn't matter. Yeah.
I guess I would have to go back to origins.
Go back to what?
If you're going to argue against Darwin, I would have to go back to origins. I would have to go back.
Go back. I'm not understanding your word. Go back to what?
Origins.
Origins?
Origin.
Okay.
The very beginning.
Right, okay. So in the beginning, no God, the beginning, God.
Exactly. If there's no God, where does that ball of matter come from? That
Right.
exploded
We just
in the
don't know,
beginning?
right? We just don't know where it came
They don't
from.
know where it came from.
But it's there, we just don't know. We can't scientifically verify where it came from, but it's here. We don't know where it came from, but if you're saying God, that's just your belief, that's not science.
And so is theirs.
Okay.
It's just belief.
But they're saying they don't know.
What?
Which is a brick wall. At least ours offers,
It offers something, but God can't be scientifically verified.
Neither can their position.
That's why they say they don't know.
Well, that's an excuse.
No, an excuse would be to try and make it God did it. That's an excuse. By saying we don't know, that's being objective.
But if they don't know, then how can they know that it's not God?
So they at least have to have a possibility that that's God then, right?
Yep.
Because if you're saying not God, how do you know? So in order to know something's false, what do you have to know?
That's something else is true.
What the truth is. Otherwise you won't, yeah, if you're going to Paul's class, it's through
Sorry.
here. Otherwise you won't know. So to say that God does not exist, you have to know for a fact that he doesn't exist. How do you know that? You don't. That's a belief. So you can start to pull out some of their beliefs. But what have we been doing for the past 3 months? Looking, I'm not even going to say it. What have we been doing from the past 3 months in here that would really help all of this out?
Learning questions to ask.
Right. And which ones are those? Which are those questions that we have been going over for the past 3 months?
Has to be a necessary being.
Right. So what are
cause,
okay? What are those referred to again? Right. I'll just write it down. First principles. I think the way to understand and to remember things is to put you in a position where it's like, oh boy. And then now that you've heard this, maybe this will give it some duct tape or some glue to make it stick into the brain. What are these again? What are the first principles?
being,
What about it? So let's list them off. We've been going over.
something either exists or it doesn't.
Okay, so principle of what?
Principle of being. Principle of being is being.
So principle of being. We have what? Excluded middle. Either being or non-being. There can't be both. Non-contradiction. Principle of sufficient reason. What is this one again? Principle of sufficient reason basically stated is what? Everything's intelligible, which indicates purpose. Remember this quote here? Where was this last quote? I think it was on the back. Richard Dawkins. Biology is the study of complicated things that gives the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. What he's saying is, if he's saying that this was just random chance, then he's saying the principle of sufficient reason can't exist. He's using that principle to deny the principle. He's undercutting his own position. So when they're doing stuff like this, what this is referred to as is manipulation. They're manipulating every single student that they teach. And they've been doing it for 100 years. What have we been doing to call them out on this? We don't even know these principles yet. So what else do we have up here? Sufficient reason, what else?
Necessary?
Yeah, so you have a necessary being.
Being is being.
So that would be the principle of identity. Composition. See, each one of these has their purpose. And all we are doing is simply stating, if you want to have reasoned thinking towards truth, you follow these principles. Richard Dawkins made a reasonable statement towards truth by denying that there's purpose. His statement is a statement of purpose. It has a subject, it has a predicate, it has a noun, it has a verb, he has intention, he has meaning, he's using language, he's conveying something in a reasonable fashion by saying that this entire universe that exists appears like it has purpose, but it doesn't, because we've evolved naturally. So either things have purpose or things are random. Those are your only two options using the principle of of excluded middle. Either there's purpose or there's randomness. Either it was created or it came about by itself. Either there's a cause or there's nothing. Either something's moral or it's amoral. To have something that's immoral means that there's a moral principle that's been violated. So saying things are wrong, saying things that are unjust, well then there must be justice. They're contradicting themselves in every single statement that they say, but somehow this gets passed along as truth, and Christians get pushed down in the corner and called mental midgets. That we don't think. And honestly, there's some truth to that, because we don't think these things through. These aren't hard to refute. If we just learn these basic principles of reason and logic, that doesn't necessarily point to the biblical God, but it points you in the right direction, because then you can take that next step. Now take natural theology and connect it to special revelation. Take these principles and show that there's a necessary being. It can only be the biblical God that is sufficient to answer why these exist and how they came into existence. So that's just a short review on what we've been covering the past couple weeks. Now let's turn to page 3. Let's look at a different question. So the Big Bang starts with this. Time, space, matter, energy, and the laws of nature. This is where it starts. We want to go back one step and ask this question. What is the causative factor for the existence of information? Because each one of these require information. What is information? There is no known natural law that can account for the existence of information. The laws of nature do not create information. The laws of nature govern the relationship between matter and energy. They don't create. They govern, they sustain, they move, they shift, but they don't create. There is no physical or material process that is known to create information. The explanation of life from simply utilizing the hard sciences is not enough. There would be no scientific method if information did not first exist. So do we see the importance of information here? Information transcends all of this. So what we're doing now is we're asking to account for what three things that we've been talking about over and over again. I'll give you the first one. Existence. What are the next two?
Restate your question, please.
Existence, nature, and function. Every time we hear somebody speak, Richard Dawkins speak, anybody who's a skeptic speak, what we want to keep in mind again are these three questions. How do you account for the existence, for the nature, and for the function of what you're talking about? When we speak about the Big Bang, we have all of these things that were compressed into a tiny dot and exploded, and over millions and billions of years, through the laws of nature, things evolved naturally to where they are today. What we want to do is ask the question of the existence of these things, of the nature of these things and the function. Account for it. because they're just starting with it. Account for it. How did it come into existence? You're starting with this. We have to back up and say, okay, where did this come from? The information that exists in the laws of nature in all of these things. So the next bullet point, information is what? Immaterial. The hard sciences are dependent upon immaterial information. The person who believes that only matter exists and no immaterial thing exists is using information which is immaterial to convey that message to you that only matter exists. Does that make sense? What needs to be first understood is what information is and where it came from. For example, what information is behind the program for the basic human cell? What information is behind the program for DNA to function as it does? What information is behind the program that controls weather patterns? What information is behind the orderly development of human embryos? See, we want to think behind this. What is the information? What is the source? How did it come into existence? And why does it function the way it does? They're just starting there. We need to go back to the beginning. What is necessary in order for information to exist? These are the questions that scientists can't ask. And they just throw that brick wall up there saying, well, we don't know. Okay, well, let's go back to reason, because the skeptic is always the one who's using reason, and the Christians are the one who are just blindly following this book they call the Bible, this ancient text. Do you see how they have stereotypically placed us into the corner and pushed us as the mental midgets? So when people hear of the Bible, they roll their eyes. When people hear Christianity, they roll their eyes, because we have been stereotyped over the past 100 years to be these small, little, medieval, mindless people who just simply blindly follow a book. And we're not. We have all of this at our disposal, but we never learn it or use it. So we're going to look at information this morning in the sense that the laws of physics, the laws of thermodynamics, the laws that go around chemistry, cause and effect, logic, where do they come from? The laws of nature are empirical statements. So for instance, the law of gravity, it's an empirical statement. It's been tested and observed to be found true every time. But it cannot be proven to be true with absolute certainty, because tomorrow it might be different. But every time it's been observed to be doing the same thing, therefore it becomes a law. The question now is where is the source of the information that goes behind the law of gravity? And how does an immaterial law impose itself on matter to hold it down? These are really good questions that make the scientists scratch their head, because what type of questions are these? Metaphysical. They're metaphysical questions, talking about being, existence, what is real and what is not. If we're just looking at matter, if we're just looking at this, there are hundreds of questions that go outside of this that have to be answered before we start here. But if we allow the skeptic's starting point to be matter, what are we going to conclude? Like Calvin said before, we have no soul. So all we are people who have chemical impulses in the brain, neurological firings within the spinal cord up to the brain, presupposed to do what we do. No soul, no person, we're just chemicals. What is nihilism again? Right. So we have purpose right here. Nihilism is no. There is no purpose. So if we follow this, now we know why Nietzsche and nihilism came through in the postmodern movement and what is a woman and all of that stuff. It all flows. It all follows. It's all been socially engineered. There's intention and purpose behind this. And if we've read Ephesians 6, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. It's not the college professor, ultimately. It's not the billionaire elite or whoever, ultimately. There's a spiritual war going on. And God is being pulled out of the culture systematically, slowly by slowly, since the Enlightenment, since the Reformation, since the Middle Ages. There's been a huge shift. This isn't just by accident. We have so much at our disposal to be able to answer these questions. Look at the next bullet point. It is the laws of nature that make the operation of science even possible. The scientific method, experimentation, technological advancements, it's all the discovery of information. Do scientists create information or do they discover it? They discover it, and then they use it for the advancement in technology, so it's already there. What they didn't know 100 years ago, they know today, but it was still there 100 years ago. It was still there 1,000 years ago. We just hadn't discovered it yet. So when a scientist discovers, he's not creating. When Watson and Crick discovered DNA, they didn't create DNA. It had already existed, and they attributed it to this. Just random matter in motion over time created it. So they went back to their worldview and their presupposition of no God, therefore it had to come by natural circumstances.
Doesn't metaphysical even preclude Big Bang, according to them?
It's the whole system of it. So the atheists have their metaphysics, the Hindu has their metaphysics, the Christian has their metaphysics. So it's the theory of reality, of what they compose as reality. So then the big therefore there on the bottom of page 3. Anyone who can give an account for the origin of information holds in their hand the key to interpret the world. So, if information is immaterial, and let's just say I go on the job site and somebody shows me how to wire a house. The person who taught me to wire the house conveyed information from their mind to my mind. Information is conveyed from one mind to another. Information can be stored in a medium like this or a hard drive, but ultimately information goes from one mind to another mind. So if information is material and information is passed from mind to mind, what is necessary in order for information to even exist?
Necessary be.
What specifically about the necessary being must we conclude from this?
Intelligent mind.
So, an immaterial mind must be the source of information. Now, last week we went over all of the things that the necessary being must be. So, if an immaterial mind is the source of information, what also must be true?
The necessary being must also have that.
Yes, this and what else from last week?
Must be eternal,
Okay, eternal.
personal.
Unchanging.
What else?
All powerful.
Yep. So all the omnis, omnipotent, omnipresent, immanent, transcendent. He must be eternal. He must be personal. He must be unchanging. Remember how we got that last week from just using first principles? Have we opened up a Bible yet?
No,
No. Have we explained the biblical God yet?
no.
Yeah, by using nature, all of these point to the biblical God. So we're using natural theology. We haven't opened, because they'll disclaim, okay, you're using your book. Okay, well then we'll just use this. And now we conclude that it can only be the biblical God. So we see God in nature, but he has also spoken and communicated to us in special revelation. And this is where we build that bridge from natural theology to special revelation in our evangelism. Now, the Word of God is what saves, and I'm not saying natural revelation saves, but the nature speaks of the handiwork of God, and we can show this by using logic and simply understanding the existence, the nature, and the function of everything that we're looking at. So on the bottom of page 3, the essence or the nature of information is its mental content, not words, numbers, or letters. Those are just the mediums by which we use to convey information. Information is encoded in symbols. The symbol represents the meaning contained within it. The representation is a suitable coding system, and the realities could be objects, physical, chemical, or biological conditions. Is that making sense so far with information? The reality being misrepresented is usually not present at the time in the place of the transfer of information. It cannot be observed or measured at the moment. Example, a recipe for a birthday cake. It's not physically tangible until you make it. But the information is contained in the recipe. So really, in the abstract, you can understand what a birthday cake is and what it consists of and how it comes into existence, its nature and its function, just by looking at the recipe. So not everything has to be tangible and material sitting in front of you. And this is where the materialist or those who are involved in scientism say, if I can't see it, taste it, touch it, or see it with my senses, I can't know it. Well, what if we looked at something in the abstract sense, like a recipe? You can fully understand a cake without it being sitting in front of you. So the real battle then is not what's materially in front of us, but it's what's abstract in the mind. And this is where we go back to the metaphysical. The deception is coming in the metaphysical area. We're getting hit by this, but we don't understand where the attack is coming from. The culture has been transformed, but we don't understand the nature of where this is coming from, or what belief system is being exchanged for the other belief system, or what are the philosophies behind it, or how do we counter and answer the claims that they're making. So the next one here on top of page 4, information is immaterial. It doesn't take up space. It doesn't project out into space. A person's brain does not become bigger or heavier because they memorize books. Therefore, information cannot be derived from matter. So not everything can be matter. There goes the materialist's position, right out the door. It must have an immaterial source, being characteristics of the necessary being. It's impossible for information to exist because from nothing, nothing comes. So matter and energy are simply the carriers of information. They are not the essence of information. So messages are composed of mental content. The message itself cannot be determined if the information is... So this is one other thing, interesting point. The message itself that's being conveyed cannot determine for itself if it's valuable or useful. So when we have one mind here speaking to another mind here, the information's going from one person's mind to another. We have one intellect communicating to another intellect. Today we just say we are what our brains do. Does the brain think?
No, the mind thing.
Are the mind and the brain the same thing?
No.
If you were to ask somebody today if the mind and the brain are the same thing, what do you think they'd say? Yes?
Yes.
You see how natural theology has been corrupted? The very creation of God is being corrupted to dilute and to distort and to take away that we're image of God bearers, that we bear the image of God, that we're nothing but our brains, the chemical reactions in our mind. In reality, our soul, our intellect takes in the information and then it gets received into the other person's mind, and by using first principles, we know that what we're being taught is true, it's objective, it's right, it's wrong, needs to be corrected. All of this comes from information to the intellect using first principles, not just chemical impulses in our brain. So then, when the chain of transmission by which the information is sent and it's traced back. So if we're going to take all the information of the world and trace it back all the way to its origin, where are we going to end up? Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. This is how we evangelize today, just like this. Just take natural theology, write it back to its natural course and say, okay, now, what is necessary in order for information to exist? An immaterial mind. That is what? Infinite, eternal, unchangeable, personal. And where do we see this? In Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Otherwise, you have to go with what? Purposelessness, naturalism. Things just came about by themselves. Those are your only two options. Questions before we conclude here with the last point?
In a way, it seems like it was easier for the Apostle Paul to evangelize because people had the common sense to know there were gods out there.
Yeah.
They saw that idol to the unknown God. They realized there was a God that made everything. They didn't have the Bible, so
Right.
they didn't know the right God, and that's where Paul came in.
Yeah, we are in kind of an interesting bubble in our point in history where the past 200 years we've shifted towards an atheistic approach where if you look at all of human history, there's always been a belief in the supernatural everywhere except the past 200 years. So actually this new atheism or this shift to nihilism is relatively new and you don't see it in history. So it's kind of a novelty. But they're trying to propose it and make it look as if this has been around for this whole time. It's not. It's a very small blip on the radar. If you look at all human history, and there has been the belief in the supernatural. Vinny, you got a question?
Yeah, even though they don't, their doctrine is there's no God, this thing, they still have the image of God in them, and they don't actually live that way.
Right.
Like, my uncle goes, like, you can just ask him, if they, like, my uncle come at me all these bad religious things, well, what's wrong with that? What, like, yeah, his doctrine, there's no reason anything should be wrong with that, but they don't live that way, so we're kind of breaking that down for them as, yeah, part of this.
Right, because along with first principles that we have on the left board, on the right board here, we have what's known as natural law. And natural law is the moral code written on the hearts of humanity. So you can go to anywhere in the world, show them an injustice, and they get upset. No matter where you go in the world, you'll see this. So this, with the moral law, you find in Romans 2:14 through 15. Here, the first principle is you find this in reason and in logic, and you put all of this together. You have to account for this as well. You have to account for this. There's just so much at the Christian's disposal. But we'll get into this later now. Or just because you're supernatural doesn't mean you're necessarily Christian, because what's becoming more popular today now is it's a shift back into pantheism, which the Apostle Paul was dealing with in Acts 17 with the unknown God. And along with pantheism, you have Neoplatonism. And who's a big proponent of Neoplatonism today? This guy.
Jordan Peters?
Yep. So they're realizing, and then through this use of psychedelic drugs, DMT and everything else, that they're seeing these beings, they're seeing these entities. People are starting to realize that, yeah, atheism, it's on the way out. But it's still very prominent in a lot of people's... What ends up happening is, generally speaking, when you sit down and talk to an atheist or to a skeptic, what generally is happening is somebody's mad at God at some point in their life for something that happened. So they've abandoned ship and jumped on the skeptic atheistic side. It's not that there's been a logical reason or a logical conclusion involved there. People are just mad at God. So what's happening is they're just using these arguments to bring them up to try to support their justification as to why they don't believe God exists. So really, it's not a battle of the intellect. It's a battle of the will. At the end of the day, it's this. So if you start here with the moral code, everybody knows they've done wrong. Everybody knows God exists. Everybody knows someday they're going to die and they're going to have to face God for the accountability of their actions. So in evangelism, really, starting here is very effective because everybody can experientially relate to the fact that they have done things wrong in the past, that they know God exists, and when you put these two together, it makes people very uneasy. But then, after that's exposed, then we go, so we had law, shows the need, we have to go to grace. Never separate those two. So the last part of page 4, we only got a minute. I don't think we're going to be able to get into it, but it's pretty much repeating what we went over. Any last questions?
They're angry at God. How can you be angry at somebody that...
Well, this shows that they don't not believe in him, that they do believe in him, yeah. In Romans chapter 1, 2, also says that even though they have the know of God, that he does exist because of the creation, they suppress that knowledge and unrighteousness, and they worship the pagan deities and gods that are before them. So they shift to paganism, so it's nothing really new. It's just what point of the circle are we on of human nature? I mean, if we understand history, you look at the children of Israel, it's the same thing. God revealed himself to them. He gave them the Torah. He gave them the prophets. He gave them the writings. They fell into paganism. They fell into idolatry. They sinned. God brought judgment. Nothing new under the sun, right? All right, we are finished. We'll pray and come back next week. Lord, we just thank you for everything that you have revealed about yourself, especially in your word, but also in nature. Lord, that we use all these things to your glory and don't allow your glory to be taken from your creation. So we thank you for all things in your Son's name. Amen.